Camellya is one of the most hyped up characters for Wuthering Waves, and her release in patch 1.4 is going to be very dangerous for a lot of people's asteroids, especially when they start realizing the literal next patch is going to be the release of a newer region. So a lot of people have the question, should I really be pulling for Camellya? Well, here I am with a couple of reasons why you should pull for Camellya, and then a couple of reasons on why you shouldn't. That way you yourself can decide, what do I value the most? Now first of all, let's head into some reasons on why you should. The first thing to mention when anyone talks about Camellya is that she's going to do an absurd amount of damage. And when I say absurd, I mean it. Remember when Jinji first came out and she was universally considered as the best DPS in the entire game? This was because she just did that much more damage than everyone else. And Camellya is going to be in a similar boat. Camellya's damage is mainly centered around her basic attacks, which she enhances through her skill. This means that, much like Jinji, she can lock in instantly and isn't reliant on energy to do her job. But much like Jinji again, most of the damage doesn't come until later, as she needs to enhance her basic attacks again in order to start doing her insane numbers. Her damage is far above most other DPSs we have right now, including the 5-star ones, with the only exception being Jinji. Looking at Jian, a large part of his team's damage is still coming from Mortefi, about 20% to be specific. But Camellya, she takes charge and says, "Nuh-uh, I'm the DPS here," and she means it. Nearly 90% of the team's damage is hers. Another thing that is helping her out here is that her area coverage is quite impressive. Now, why does this matter? I thought most endgame content was bosses and that AoE wasn't that relevant. Well, that's only a part of the story. In the Hazard Zone, 2 out of 4 hard stages often feature a wave of enemies to take out before the big bad spawns in. And those often really like having good AoE. I'm the ultimate Jian glazer, so obviously I'm going to know the importance of AoE. Overdrive Zone also often features extensive AoE chambers where you are dealing with several waves of enemies at a time, which is where Camellya is going to excel. One thing I will say about her AoE is that while her range is higher than Jian, she doesn't have his vacuum effect. Enemies are still free to move away from her attacks, so I think Jian is still better for small mobs, but small mobs were never the issue anyway, so that's not that relevant. Now, I went to the comparison with Jinji a little bit earlier on, but I feel it's important to expand on it more. The amount of things Jinji and Camellya have in common is honestly a little scary, and makes me think they may have more of a counterpart dynamic than I initially suspected. Jinji and Camellya are both DPS characters who mainly deal with one damage type, skill or basic attack respectively, and then have their Resonance Liberation as another chunk of damage. They also use their skill to enhance their basic attacks in some way, and save most of their damage for the later parts of their field time. And it becomes even funnier when you see their damage being so similar. Camellya is the first ever competition Jinji got in terms of damage, and I think that is kind of terrifying. Although I would like to point out that Jinji still doesn't have a perfect support. Just wait until we get a skill buffer with coordinate attacks with at least 38% skill damage on outro. When discussing Camellya's flaws, one thing becomes incredibly apparent, and that is Camellya is physically incapable of moving. Her freaky personality leading her to tying herself up led her to disaster, because now she is in a wheelchair. I don't know how much I need to stress how preposterous this is. A character in Wuthering Waves does not know how to use the WASD keys. What? Granted, she can still dodge, but come on, this is just absurd. Sure, some bosses will stay in place anyway, like the Mech Abomination, but you cannot tell me this is with every boss. Inferno Rider literally has a motorcycle, and he knows how to use the damn thing. But he's not even the worst offender. Ferelian Baringo also loves to charge across the room and he is going monkey mode. But you want to know 2 words that will strike fear in the heart of every Camellya main? Thundering Mephis. Good luck. And you think that her being unable to move would be the end of it? Ha! Naive. You see, Camellya has another issue when it comes to her being unable to move. Sure, not every enemy will move away, but that is merely because they're getting ready to annihilate you. And guess what? Camellya cannot just run away. She has to look danger in the eyes and dodge. When you play a character like Jian, this is easy. He doesn't have a 19-hit combo to finish. But Camellya likes her multi-hits, and she wants to charge her Concerto with her Forte meter, which her multi-hits help her a lot with. And if you're too busy dodging, you can't really get these combos off. But that is not much of an issue since the act of dodging itself gives Concerto. So that's a win for Camellya. But yeah, she puts herself in a unique position no other unit puts themselves in. Contrast with Jinshi, who's able to grapple into the air after her skill to make sure she doesn't get hit by 90% of enemy attacks. Camellya's gameplay is also a bit more complicated than Jinshi's, but it's not very hard to understand, so you'll be fine. And then finally, Camellya's damage is currently almost as high as it can possibly go. This means that Camellya in the future isn't going to be seeing many more buffs. Why does this matter? Well, she's the final character before 2.0. Being the final character before 2.0 is a terrifying prospect. And if I have learned anything from other gachas, it's that new versions is usually when we get a raise of the DPS. New DPSs and new heights to reach. Camellya already has an incredible buffer in the form of Sanhua. Nearly everything in her kit is basic attack damage, and Sanhua is buffing those with her outro. Sanhua also has stupidly low field time, so she's nearly perfect for Camellya. The only way they could really make a better support for Camellya is to give 20% havoc damage and 25% basic attack damage. And even then, that would not be that big of an increase. Jian and Sheng Liao have similar problems, but Sheng Liao can run dual carry, so he'll be fine. But for characters that aren't at full potential yet, Jinshi is the biggest example. The second we get a Spectre skill buffer with coordinate attacks, I'm afraid for the potential numbers that she's going to be pumping out. But what do you guys think? Do you think Camellya is worth pulling for? Well, I personally don't think I'm gonna pull for her. She definitely is a good character, and if you like Camellya, she's definitely worth getting. If you have any other questions to ask me, you can comment, but it would be way easier to reach me through my Discord server or my Twitter, both of which are linked in the description. But if you just want to leave a normal comment telling you if you're gonna get Camellya or not, you can just put that in the comment section. And while you're there, you might as well like the video and subscribe to the channel. But that'll be all from me. Peace.